So welcome everyone. This is Filecoin Core Devs call number 61. Today is Friday, September 1st or Thursday, August 31st, depending where you are in the world. We have a really busy agenda today. So first, we're going to go through a couple of quick housekeeping items for Core Devs. And then we're going to turn it over for a few different technical presentations, and including an analysis from the CEL team. At the end, we'll round it out discussing the upcoming network upgrade, and we will also flag an additional CryptoNet research item at the end of this call as well. Again, really packed agenda, so we're going to try and facilitate speaking really tightly. So if you do have questions that can be handled async, please signal those in the chat. But please be aware that if you go too far over time, I may interrupt as well. That being said, we want to know that we have been discussing having pre-scheduled upgrades starting in 2024. It seems like a lot of people are really on board with this idea. We do have an open issue in GitHub. If you'd like to discuss, you're welcome to add your thoughts there. However, Jennifer has suggested sort of a cadence for these upgrades, starting with 3 per year, starting in late February or early March, July, and October. The point of flagging this here is just to let everyone know that there hasn't really been any follow-up on this for a few weeks, so it seems like we have consensus to move forward with this. If you disagree or have an alternative proposal, please let us know, and we will also flag the discussion link for this in all of the follow-up materials that Lucky usually shares. In addition, as mentioned, the CryptoNet team does have a new report that they have just put out that they'd like us to flag for everyone. Sorry, I forgot I'd move this up rather than keeping it at the end. Wanted to make sure we referenced it. There is a recording that Irene put together for us, and then there's also a link to the doc as well. Highly recommend everyone take a look. And as before, we'll make sure to share this with all of our post-meeting materials as well. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into the first section. Alejandro, are you here to walk us through your proposal?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great.
Awesome. Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm Alejandro from the Consensus Lab team. We've been working in Consensus Lab into getting faster finality in Filecoin. So the problem with Filecoin's expected consensus is that it's a longest chain type of protocol, which inherently means long finalization times. That is because the confidence in a transaction not being reverted comes from waiting an amount of time and a number of blocks that is appended to the block where this transaction is, so that the probability of a reorganization decreases over time. In other longest chain types of protocol like Bitcoin, the system itself doesn't prescribe a particular finalization time. This is not so much the case in Filecoin because the power table is part of the state itself and is considered fine. It's assumed to not suffer reorganizations by the implementations, by the Filecoin clients. And so the system itself actually prescribes 900 epochs for the power table to be considered final. It can be lower for some applications. So for example, CoinList takes 2 hours for a transaction to be considered confirmed. But there is a risk involved, of course, to lower finalization times. And in any case, any reasonable time for important state updates will take tens of minutes for any longest chain type of protocol. This is a huge pain point and a product blocker for the Filecoin ecosystem. It doesn't just hinder user experience for the core usage. So storage providers must wait for these 900 epochs to see any update to their power reflected or any storage deal reflected, but also just simple transactions, deposits into an exchange take hours to be confirmed. But especially it's painfully long, it's a pain point for many applications. It's exciting projects that are building on top of in the Filecoin ecosystem. We have many examples here, but in Consensus Lab, we're focused on IPC, on offloading value from mainnet into dedicated subnets, depending on applications. And these subnets require somewhat frequent interactions with mainnet and with other subnets. And any number of hours for subnet mainnet interactions is just embarrassing, and it's a no-go for IPC. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So the solution we propose is what we call a finalization model, with which we target sub-epoch finalization. It's a simple model that only has 2 components. One is what we call Granite, which is a novel BFT consensus protocol that we have designed with open systems with a lot of participants in mind. like the case for Filecoin, and something that we call the finalizer, which has a funny name, but it's just a very simple algorithm that uses Granite to finalize tip sets. The implementation of the finalization model can be done completely modular, and it requires minimal changes to the Filecoin client's code bases. In fact, in the fifth discussion that we have recently opened, and I invite you all to participate in it, we have recently realized that actually the two operations that are required to be exposed by the primary chain structure of Filecoin clients is already there. So we don't strictly need any modification to the existing code base, just the addition of the Filecoin of the finalization model. But we're still discussing some design choices that might be wise while we're doing this, while we're proposing this update. At the moment, we're targeting full participation with the BFT consensus protocol that we propose. Now, we believe, can you go to the next slide? We believe Granite will tolerate the number of participants that exist in current day Filecoin, but suppose the number of the block miners in Filecoin, instead of 3,000 or in the order of 3,000 we have now, multiplied by 10 or 100, there will also be a practical limit to how many participants can participate in one instance of a BFT consensus protocol, and that's why we are preparing early on with support for committees, so subsets of these participants executing the consensus protocol, and of course support for weighted committees. We have justified, so I have gone over a little bit why longer chain types of protocol, and when you want long finalization, just modifying expected consensus without something like a quorum-based type of consensus protocol is not the way to go to obtain finality within seconds or within a few minutes. But why Granite, right? Why not just an existing consensus protocol? Well, as I said before, we have designed Granite with open systems in mind with huge participation, and we believe it's a very good fit for that. The main feature of Granite is that it's completely leaderless. So every participant in the consensus protocol executes exactly the same code. There's no designated subset that has a specific role, which makes it as resilient to denial of service attacks as a vanilla consensus protocol can be. Of course, you can have orthogonal improvements like VRF, self-selection, things like that, which of course we are considering for Granite as well. So Granite is also not vulnerable to network disruptions. So we assume no synchrony for safety whatsoever, and we have even a variant where no synchrony is required for liveness either. And the main goal of Granite, which is to provide fast finality, is obtained by only requiring exchanging a linear number of P2P messages of constant size for a Granite instance to terminate with a finalized tip set. And in the case that we decide to execute it with constant size committees, it would only require to exchange a constant number of P2P messages. So that's extremely fast, especially considering that these messages are only exchanged over 2 or 3 communication steps in most cases. And we believe that will provide sub-epoch finalization. So that is fantastic, because that means that in the same epoch that a tip set has been proposed, it has already become final before the epoch finishes, which in effect provides mitigation for deferred execution. So what's next? Well, of course, I have already mentioned it. Please engage in the existing discussion, the fifth discussion that we have at the moment. We have most time spec out, but there's still some rough edges, and your opinion will be super relevant for that. So a bit of order. We are also detailing the specification. We expect to have Are you still hearing me? my okay, I guess yes. Sorry, there was something, my headphones were talking. Yeah, we expect to have a full specification by the end of September. And once that is done, we will be working to test an MVP in Q4 this year, with the aim to upgrade Filecoin with this fast finality by Q1 next year. That will be all. Please, if you think you have valuable input, participate in the discussion. We will also be at FieldDev in Singapore and Iceland, giving some talks on Granite and on the finalization model. So let's have a chat if you have anything interesting in this project. And if you want to know a bit more about what we've been doing, have a look at the Granite indexer that gathers all the docs that we've been working on in the past few months.
Thank you, Alejandro. Any questions for Alejandro or about fast finality in general? All right, likely more once we get the FIP draft up for people to read and provide some more thoughtful commentary there too as well. But this was great, thank you. And as always, we will make sure that links to any of this, including your discussion post, is also included after the meeting. All right, next up, we have Ayush talking about FVM randomness changes. Oh, Steb, do you have a question?
Sorry, a question on the previous topic. What's the incentive to participate in this network? Why would a storage provider not just just not bother?
Yeah, so that is a good question. That is part of why we want to incentivize participation in the FIP discussion. So if that's one of the things that the opinion of core devs will be very relevant for. My opinion is that what Granite brings to the table to Filecoin is such a huge improvement in terms of finalization at such a low cost in terms of extra messages and signature verification, etc. That
we'll just do it. Yeah, that might be possible. What fraction of the network needs to participate?
Say that again.
What fraction of the network needs to participate?
Yeah, so we are targeting full participation, but of course, once we have an MVP and run some tests, we will know exactly the limit to perform at the rate that we want Granite to perform for.
But I mean, like what happens when part of the network just doesn't show up? Because there's going to be at least a few storage packages don't show up. Yeah,
so Granite is optimal resilient without asymmetricity, which means that 33% of the participants running Granite can go offline or do anything weird, whatever they want, or behave arbitrarily, basically.
So basically, as long as 60 to 70 or 70% of the network think this is a good idea and they don't just explicitly turn off the feature, it'll be fine. Okay, that makes all sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the only question I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Good questions.
Yeah, I guess Stephen's point, and maybe just to double clarify, Alejandro, you're saying that there isn't a specific consensus fractional reward that goes specifically to groups who are participating in this consensus process, and providing through that participation the fast finality service, but that it's fully optional.
That's what I'm inclined to. So that's my opinion, but the field discussion is still there. There are other things that one could do, right? The easiest would be to just reward the same fraction to everyone, but that still doesn't incentivize a partial signature, right? So a particular vote, because we only need a fraction of the votes in order to terminate. But at the same time, if you want a threshold of the votes only to be rewarded, so only the ones who vote, there should also be consensus on that. So you need to kind of run it again. So my opinion, most consensus protocols like Cosmos, Cardano, they don't explicitly provide rewards for single voting. But if that is something that is required, we can definitely, there are definitely options there. And that's why the field discussion is great for this, to continue this talk.
Any final questions for Alejandro? All right, Alejandro, thanks again. And now hand over to Ayush.
Hey everyone. This will be fairly quick. I want to present a FIP that we're calling improvements to the FVM randomness syscall. The FIP FIP draft PR is open, and thanks for the folks who've already reviewed that. This is very much this is the way things behave today, and we're making some slight tweaks to how it operates. So I wanted to start by discussing what's changing and how it currently works. So the FVM today exposes syscalls called getChainRandomness and getBeaconRandomness that fetch that actors or contracts can trigger in order to fetch randomness. And the source of the randomness itself is the Filecoin blockchain. So you just walk up the blockchain. Sorry. You walk up the blockchain and retrieve the randomness from the blocks themselves. Today, what these syscalls do, I should add, the FVM itself has no access to blockchain history, so this is very much requested. It just forwards to the client, Lotus, Forest, Venus, whatever, to say, hey, I need you to fetch me randomness that satisfies these restrictions. So today, specifically these syscalls receive the epoch from which you want to draw randomness, as well as some personalization parameters. There's two in particular. The FVM then forwards that to the client, which walks up the blockchain until it finds that requested epoch. There's no limit to how far back it's willing to walk, at least not at the syscall level. It finds a randomness of that the client finds that randomness of that epoch and performs a hash with this, introduces this personalization into the hash, and then returns that. So that's how this works today. And there's a fixed cost charged for this operation. So it doesn't really matter, I'm slightly waving my hands, but it doesn't really matter what epoch you request the randomness from, whether it's this current epoch or all the way back to Genesis, it costs the same. And this is a little insecure. So if we can go to the next slide, I want to discuss how we're changing this. So what the change is proposed to do. So you still receive an epoch to draw the randomness from, but there's no longer any of these personalization parameters. So the FVM does not receive that and obviously doesn't forward it on to the client. The client still walks up the blockchain until the requested epoch. We're still not enforcing any limit. So if you wanted to go all the way back up to Genesis, you can. The client will find the randomness as an epoch, but then there's no hashing of this personalization parameters required, and just returns that to the FVM, which will forward that on to the actor or contract. We are proposing changing the cost, however, from just being this one fixed cost to essentially linear in how far back up the chain you're walking. So the further back you're walking, the more you're going to pay for it. But if you want to walk all the way back up to Genesis, that's fine. You can do that. There's an implicit assumption over here that clients can essentially efficiently support that walk-up operation in linear time. Clients could certainly do better than that if a client wanted to implement some constant time lookup for this operation. They'd just be doing better, but the pricing is based on the assumption that it's linear. And just quickly on motivation. So why are we no longer taking these personalization params and doing the hashing for you? Short answer, you being the actor, because you can do it yourself. The FVM already provides this functionality. So just kind of following the logic of let's have the system, in this case, the FVM, and the client do as little as possible and just ask users to do this work. This is a bit more secure. It's a bit more modular. And in particular, it's less logic in the FVM, which is kind of what we always want to go for. Say there's some critical bug that implements this logic. It's now no longer a system FVM problem. It's just a problem for whatever contract that is. So it simplifies things a little bit. The change to the pricing is probably fairly evident. The further back you walk up the chain, the more time that takes. So the more that should cost. The reason, if you're wondering, how come we're doing it with this fixed cost today? It's because these randomness functions can be accessed by very specific callers, the built-in actors, basically. So user-defined contracts can't make you walk all the way back up to Genesis. And so it's not too much of a problem today. This is a future-proofing, hardening change. We expect minimal changes or minimal disruption to any users with this. But yeah, those are the changes that we're proposing making as part of kind of a hardening milestone that the FEM team is working on. So feedback welcome, and if you have any concerns in particular, please raise now or later.
Do you know if it's going to break any smart contracts already deployed on FVM?
It should not, no. So any contracts deployed will continue to function in exactly the same way. The operations might start costing differently, but nothing breaks as a result of that.
Any final questions for Ayush? All right, thank you, Ayush. So we're next going to turn it over, I think, to the Wavy and to Arthur. I think Arthur is on the call.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great.
Can you hear me?
We can. I first wanted to clarify with you. I think Lucky had reached out, but I'm not sure if we had finalized this. Did you plan to discuss 774, which is in the slides, or proposal 803, which I understand supersedes this?
It's an overview about the 774, but I believe after 774, there are different PR being issued on the GitHub, including 802 or something else.
Caitlin, so
Okay.
803 is one of the proposals that CEL mentioned in 774. So 774 covers all four proposals. We discussed all four of them.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify which specific PR you wanted to speak to. If you want to talk to all of them, then that's great.
Cool.
All right, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you for inviting. I'm Arthur. I am a storage provider in APAC area. I'm also one of the co-authors of Discussion 774. I'm sharing an interview of Discussion 774 and the process and feedbacks we got from the community so far. I think it's very important, so I have basically written down every point on the slides in case the connection is unstable. So to be short, in the Discussion 774, it's the community's concern that the continued falling price and RBP have shown that Filecoin's consensus has been weakening. Many believes that the weakening comes from the unsustainability of the current tokenomics of Filecoin. For the long-term success of Filecoin, it needs to be changed. Many concerns that have been mentioned in the discussion have been solved, can be solved by a change to the current multiplier in the Filecoin core protocol. At the same time, since Filecoin is a resilient network, the risk from the change is controllable. That is how the discussion went so far. Next page, please. Sorry, next page, please. Okay. So why did we start discussion 774 at the beginning? Filecoin's mission is broader than Phil Plus or real data in our belief. Filecoin could be able to accommodate all kind of data as long as there is a willingness to use the network, instead of just focusing on data that is recognized by only a few people. A fair and free competitive storage market will make Filecoin's narrative simpler, which will help Filecoin capture more values, including but not limited to storing humanity's most important data, securitizing global infrastructure, delivering computer data for AI, and of course, also mining and speculation too. I'm sorry, Alex. Yes, it's actually the second point page. Yes, this one. Yeah. So yes. So to be continued. Refer to the chart on the right. We're right now betting on the overlap, the small piece that contains the red dot. But we could have captured the whole value in a big storage circle in green. Of course, it's the best. I know it's the best if we can capture all the value in all big three circles. But in fact, when we're planning strategies, limited resources are precondition. So Filecoin hasn't done well enough even in the storage area itself. We don't expect we can do greatly in all three areas at the same time. Next page, please. So the community also believes that ending the multiplier privilege in the Filecoin core protocol is not the end of the current Phil Plus vision. It's just a strategic calibration to Filecoin. Instead of betting all the resources on storing humanity's most important data, Filecoin moves to focusing on providing performant and secure storage blockchain for anything that the market needs. FEM, subnets, and L2s could be used to keep dealing with Phil plus computation retrieval and etc. There will be infinite imagination based on the potential storage capacity and the interoperable layer structure provided by Filecoin ecosystem. Next page, please. So the solution we provided are pretty simple. Either way, we stop the subsidy issued by the multiplier, or we make the multiplier available to all the participants. Both have certain supporters and are technically trivial. Next page, please. Speaking of how Filecoin could potentially push us forward the change, given the far-reaching impact of the cryptoeconomics to a blockchain, we believe that we need to get hard consensus by building solid tooling that can get buy-in from two groups of people. First is token holders, and second is storage providers. We can expect these two groups to drive the best interest of the community, given their capital is at risk. It's also very objective. Note that we're not denying other roles from voting. They can always vote by holding Filecoin to provide hardware, holding Filecoin or provide hardware to the Filecoin network. Next page, please. So the conclusion is that there's a division happening in the community. It's in Filecoin's favor to retain all people who have the faith in decentralized storage. The situation is Filecoin has failed to abide by the precautionary principle of Phil plus multiplier incentive design. The damage to the consensus has been made, and Phil plus and people who support Phil plus and the multiplier need to provide a better reason for the existence of it, because most of the arguments in favor of Phil plus and the multiplier have already been dismissed by the community. If we don't make a change, it's very likely that Filecoin community will face a bigger division. It has already been started. The RVP and the huge price decline are very clear appearances of the division. Unless certain ecosystem participants violate the laws of civilization, I think it's for Filecoin's best that we can retain everyone, build together. Next page, please. So after we know that there will be questions like how will removing multiplier incentives affect the current data onboarding? In our view, by removing multiplier privilege, data onboarding will in fact be encouraged, because besides what Phil plus have today, data don't fit in Phil plus criteria. We'll be able to store on Filecoin in a fair market. So long as people put in pledge and pay gas to store the data, these data are benefiting Filecoin network. It sounds more attractive than just sticking with what we temporarily think are useful and real. So if we're specifically talking about the kind of data that are under Phil plus criteria, I think in short term, the Phil plus data onboarding rate will be declined maybe. But in long term, if we restore the integrity and the free competition to the network, data under Phil plus criteria will also be flourished. So that's basically what I have today. I hope it helps the community understand the situation and make a quicker decision before it's too late. Thank you. I believe the wave have the other author also have something to be added. Thank you.
I'm ready. Next slide, please. So I think the main benefit of the third option in CL's report, which is allowing anyone to mint data cap, is continuity in terms of collateral requirements and power multipliers. Almost all the sectors that joined the network over the past year have had the 10x power multiplier and the 10x collateral requirement versus CC. With option 3, all new sectors that join in the future will also have the same collateral requirement and the same power multiplier. Next slide, please. So our motivation for removing human-gated power multipliers. Number one, we want Filecoin to be fair. Human gating of the power multiplier on Filecoin creates an uneven playing field and a high barrier to entry for miners. Those miners who are notaries or who have good relationships with notaries and the governance team have a big advantage when it comes to securing the power multiplier. It's easier to get applications approved and they can buy in bulk at lower prices. On the other hand, small miners and new miners, especially those with no connections in the Filecoin ecosystem, are at a big disadvantage when it comes to getting the power multiplier. Compared to mining on other chains, mining on Filecoin Plus involves a lot of non-technical off-chain work and has less predictable ROI because a miner's access to the power multiplier is gated by capricious human beings rather than by mathematical mechanisms like those used on other chains. The additional financial and operational overhead is especially hard on smaller miners and new miners. The result is a less diverse and more centralized ecosystem. By getting rid of these human gatekeepers, we will get a more transparent, predictable, and fair protocol. I expect that to attract new miners and lead to more competition, and in the long run, cheaper and better storage. And next slide, please. Reason number two, we want miners to focus on business, not politics. Empowering non-users to define usefulness has been a source of endless conflict. Notaries and the governance team are not users of Filecoin. They do not pay for storage or transact on the chain. We have asked them for an objective measure of usefulness other than willingness to pay, and no one has given us one. It is impossible to get consensus around non-quantitative, non-verifiable systems of power multiplier allocation. Therefore, the rules of Filecoin Plus will always be changing. Miners and notaries will argue that the kind of data they have easy access to is useful and that other types of data are not. They will argue against SLA that is difficult for them to follow and in favor of services that they can easily provide. There will always be dirty competition to win the favor of notaries and the governance team. Bribes, fraud, framing other miners, etc. This is a bad use of miners' time and energy. Arguing over these rules is pointless because in 99% of cases, the miner is just buying a power multiplier and there is no real user anyway. Very soon, when the whole network is 10x, following these extra rules will not even provide a subsidy, but the burden will remain. So instead of forcing miners to be legislators and lobbyists, allow them to spend all of their time committing capacity, making deals, and building apps. Next slide, please. The third reason is that we value willingness to pay more than PR. No data or client is valuable in and of itself. It doesn't matter how famous the client or how important the data is. Only paying users drive value in Filecoin. I do not believe that the governance team and notaries are able to predict what the real use cases and paying users of Filecoin will be, especially because the capital being used to subsidize potential use cases is not their own. Last slide, please. The way forward. After 8 years in the wild, the #1 paid service on Ethereum is just trading wrapped Ether for USDC on Uniswap. Yet no one predicted the invention of the AMM when Ethereum launched in 2015, and it didn't require any subsidies to succeed after it was deployed on-chain. This is a very underwhelming application, but it and other simple applications like over-collateralized lending and non-fungible tokens have been sufficient to get Ethereum to a $200 billion market cap. The Bitcoin ecosystem is even simpler and has twice Ethereum's market cap. I believe the bar for Filecoin's success is much lower than people think. If the chain is fair and technically differentiated from Bitcoin and Ethereum, then we will find product market fit sooner or later. Thank you. And I'm a token holder, by the way.
All right. Thanks to both of you. So quite a bit of information, but I think we should pause there and start to answer some questions. I know Kieran has a follow-up that goes along with this to talk about sort of the Crypto Econ Lab's perspective on this and the analysis that they've done. If it seems like there's a good segue, we'll move over to including that analysis as well. But to kick it off, Vic, should we start with your question? You referenced you'd like to better understand one of the slides. I think it was the second one that Arthur spoke to, perhaps. What data is being stored? What data is being blocked from being stored now that would be stored if Filecoin Plus was removed? There is no block on regular deals.
Because in my personal opinion, basically all the data out of the Phil Plus criteria are blocked because the multiplier make the other kind of data uncompetitive comparing to the data that fit in the Phil Plus criteria.
Arthur, can you clarify what data is outside Phil Plus criteria? Because I believe there's 4 different programs in the Phil Plus. Phil Plus is made up of multiple different programs. There's an enterprise program for private enterprise data. There's a more focused, large scale data program. There's a small data program that gives any GitHub account 64 gigabytes. So what data is outside Phil Plus?
Yeah, one thing directly come to my mind was David Kayson's client, because his client, they're not willing to put in more than one times of the multiplier into the sector. So that will it feels like a discrimination to different data on Filecoin with the multiplier. So the ones who are not willing to take huge risk of the Filecoin price will be left out.
Sorry, this is, you have the storage provider doesn't want to put up collateral for
not exactly.
the deal,
the client,
for the Phil Plus deal, because the client doesn't have to put up 10x collateral. It's only the storage provider.
But in the end, it's the same. I feel in the end it's the same because the client will have to take the risk as well, because the Filecoin price will directly affect the business of the storage provider. If the price is shocking too much, storage providers will be unsustainable and their data will not be stored, will be in danger.
Molly, I have a question for you. Is it possible to ask you a question here?
I think you guys are the ones being asked questions right now. I think we're trying to discuss your point, and I don't want to have you guys not have the space and time in this venue to respond to those questions. I know Stephen has one as well.
Sorry, I really want to respond to that previous point, because that's not correct. The collateral is proportional to the power you get on the network. So regardless of whether or not you use Phil Plus or you don't use Phil Plus, you will put down the same amount of collateral to get the same amount of power on the network. So that doesn't really have an effect. I think the confused there.
Sorry, but the collateral, 10 times of the collateral, the multiplier will give the storage provider 10 times of the reward comparing to the 1 times of the multiplier of the storage provider. So for the storage providers who can serve for 10 times DC, they have comparatively better cost, lower cost. So that will make these kind of storage providers more competitive than the storage providers who provide service to 1 times of the the normal deals. I think
that doesn't make sense. Sorry, I'm confused because this again, it's proportional. So it's you put down X Filecoin, you get back X reward. If you use Phil Plus, there's a 10x multiplier, but it is on both the collateral and the reward. It just means you have to seal less data. So it doesn't mean that basically there's no loss for taking a Filecoin Plus deal here. Yes, you're putting down more collateral, but you're also getting back proportionally more reward. So there shouldn't be any difference there.
No, what he's saying is that if you try to use the permissionless part of the network and you don't want to go through notaries, then
that's not what
you can't make a profit.
So I feel like I agree with that, but that's not what it said. That was the concern here. That was the question, where we're saying there is no reason, basically, if you have the opportunity to use notaries, there is no reason not to use the notaries. And that was the point.
But why should it be required to go through notaries to make a profit?
I really don't like that feature of the Filecoin network.
Yeah, I don't either.
It was not the point that was being discussed.
But I think we need to get to the core of the issue, which is that the network is permissioned and highly centralized.
I will also remind
sorry, okay.
Yeah, I will say that this is the core devs call, and the purpose is to talk about the technical specifications of this proposal. You are more than welcome in community discussion forums to have conversations about like the ideological or visionary direction of Filecoin, but that's not what this forum is for. So as long as it relates to your proposal, we welcome it, but we don't want to go through a rabbit hole. So just a fair warning.
Yeah, and we're not trying to convince anyone. It's just sharing the current status that's in our view. So yeah.
Seb, if you have any, do you have any follow-ups that you want to add?
No, I'd actually like to hear the analysis from CEO.
Yeah, I would too.
Jonathan, I think you have a question first. You had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, this is less technical, more just like economical. About I think some of the, like, I think what everyone's saying is kind of true at the same time, but just like at different sort of like economic snapshots of the network. And so I think like one of the problems is that like what Steb is saying is 100% true. Like, especially if everyone is pledging 10x sectors, it makes a lot more sense. But I think, at least that's how I understand it. But one of the problems that I think is happening right now is that what was once a subsidy is now a majority. And so for you as a storage provider, you can't compete on unverified deals, even if you're actually getting paid storage deals, because there's so much data cap in existence. You have to actually, you're more profitable to go spend business development hours right now to try and game fill plus, rather than to go out and find paid storage clients. And so I think that's kind of like, it's a problem with the pollution of data cap and the current state of the network, rather than, or at least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think there's actually really strong agreement around like quality and making sure that subsidies go towards storing data and bringing data to the Filecoin ecosystem is like critical, and not towards incentivizing gaming of mechanisms. And we need to improve our mechanisms to make sure that they are not gameable and not, incentivizing the opposite of what we're trying to do as a network, which is be a useful storage network. But I think something that's really important, which one of the earlier slides, but we kind of went through two presentations, was talking about like, hey, we expect token holders and storage providers to have the say over the network governance and about this direction forward, effectively writing clients and storage clients out, and ecosystem developers and all of the other, we have 5 pillars, I think, of our ecosystem that we care about as a Filecoin network. And it is not just token holders and storage providers. Both of those groups are important, but they are not the only important groups in this ecosystem. Clients do play a very critical role in storing data in Filecoin. That's who Filecoin serves. And so I just want us to make sure that we're clarifying that as we go about sourcing community feedback on proposals, to make sure that we are talking to the people who are actually storing their data in Filecoin today and bringing their data into this ecosystem, because they are playing a critical service that we absolutely want to accelerate and support and be proponent.
Molly, you mentioned quality. This is something that I talked about in my presentation. The definitions that we have of quality are extremely subjective. At the end of the day, people need to pay in order for Filecoin to have value. If you think that a data set is really valuable for humanity, but the user isn't paying, that's not going to help the price of Filecoin.
I disagree with you entirely. I think there's a lot of really good counterexamples to that proposal or that way of framing it. Again, I don't want us to get down rabbit holes here. I'm sensitive to time, and I know we have more presentations, but I strongly disagree. I think there are many high quality data sets. You'll notice AWS, for example, offers credits, hosts data sets that are then used frequently for compute jobs. There are many types of data that are valuable for a network to store and offer, because those attract additional usage. They very much do have an impact on the utility of the network, things like that. And so I disagree with your
I think that's extremely speculative. You're hoping that these data sets will bring value to the network.
Right. So again, this is the point. We're not going to rabbit hole down on these things when there are these fundamental disagreements that don't really relate to the context of this proposal in this environment. Jonathan and Steb, you both have your hands up. Do you want to ask your questions, or should we give Kieran time to also speak to this with his analysis?
I do feel like it is important to note here that like there does need to be money flowing into the network. Someone needs to be using the network and paying for something happening. We have not seen anything except for people potentially willing to pay for storage. Basically, the inputs right now are speculation, gas, and storage. This is an economic question, but I don't know. I think that we would need more evidence that people are willing to. I think there is a valid argument that the fact that the system is not charging for storage is limiting the income from the network, regardless of Phil Plus. I guess that's the point I want to make.
So I think this is a good
And
second.
you can look at gas fees as like the first, gas is the significant first use case. There's, I agree, it's not layer twos, minting tokens. The first most successful use case Ethereum had was people doing ICOs on top of Ethereum. So I think that is actually a really
an income source
good.
That's not miners.
Yeah, layer two networks are an example of that. That's also, for example, demand for chain space is a totally valid use case. We could go on with this. I don't want to rat hole us here. I agree that I want to see lots of groups paying for lots of things on top of Filecoin, but I would not say that storage is the only one.
Kieran, keeping in mind we have about 10 minutes left, and we do want to make sure Jennifer has some time to touch base quickly about MB21. Yeah. Are there any follow-up points or you want to discuss?
If you're asking me, I can go through my slides in about 2 to 3 minutes, because this is simply an analysis of kind of the different options that were proposed in the 774 discussion. And I've laid out the options here on the right here. So option 1 is drop the multiplier from 10 to 1 immediately. This is the QA multiplier that's currently given to deal sectors. So option 1 is cut the multiplier away. Option 2 is ramp it down. And option 2 and 4 are pretty similar in the sense that they both ramp down, just different schedules. And then option 3 is to give everyone the 10x multiplier. So before, I just want to state 2 different caveats, which is that 1, this is an extremely large cryptoeconomic change with significant impact to Filecoin. So it's not something that, I mean, in my opinion, and I think in CL's opinion, it's not something that we can rush through. And the other aspect is that we simply did an analysis of the different options that were presented, but we're not endorsing any of them. But with those caveats in mind, I'll go through the analysis in detail, but just as a quick TLDR, in terms of comparing all of the different options and how they affect the network performance metrics or performance indicators, option 3 is the one that kind of is the least disruptive to the network in terms of it continues to offer benefits for new SPs to join because of the multiplier enables you to dilute costs. And then, but the downside of option 3 is that right now there exists an explicit incentive mechanism that's set up to onboard data. If you remove that, then it is something that could potentially still happen, but there is no guarantee because there's no explicit incentive in the economics. And so that's the kind of TLDR. If we go to the next slide, I can talk through these. And so this panel, and I apologize, it's a little bit busy, but we can go through each of the main network performance indicators for each of these options when comparing it to the no change. So the column on the far left represents no change in the crypto economics right now. So the 10x stays for Phil Plus and 1x is for CC. And so option 1, remember, is the option where everybody goes to 1x. And this vertical dotted line in each of these plots represents the simulated date when we changed the multiplier. And so in option 1, we can see that because we applied we removed the multiplier, network QAP starts dropping, and eventually after all of the old QA sectors expire, QA reaches RB. They converge. And what happens here is you see a drop in locking, and also in terms of the fill-on-fill returns. The fill-on-fill returns, when we computed this, we wanted to take into account the cost dilution that the multiplier offers. And so when you take the fill-on-fill returns with costs, you see a significant drop as soon as this policy change is made. But then the fill-on-fill returns climbs over time because keep in mind that this policy change is simply affecting the QA multiplier, but it doesn't change anything else specifically with regards to how the rewards are distributed. And so you get basically less dilution, and because the pledge is going down, you see an increase back in the fill-on-fill returns. Now, I don't need to go through option 3 or 2 and 4 are basically exhibit the same qualities, but because they reduce the multiplier from 10 to 1 on different schedules, you see slightly different trajectories, but the conclusions basically remain the same. In terms of option 3, because everyone is now getting the 10x multiplier, you get a slightly higher network QAP than in the no change scenario. And this is the reason it's only slightly higher is because currently 90% of onboarding is Fill Plus. And so we're basically making that 100% in this case. But otherwise, there's not too much of a change between the 10x option and the current status quo. And that's really all I had. It's been 5 minutes.
That is helpful, Kieran. Yeah.
I was just going to add, you can read in more details. There's a HackMD.
Yeah, I also just typed up a notice too to say that the preliminary FIP draft, as long as we're talking about 803, does look pretty good in its current state. But FIP editors, including myself, have done a preliminary review and asked for like additional details specifically related to security and incentive change for this FIP. I think, as you mentioned at the beginning, this is actually a huge network change. And speaking just for myself, like we recognize the sensitivity and the interest in this. But it's really important that we add more and be collaborative and continue to flesh this out. This is a good part of it. It's great that CL was able to put this together so quickly, but it might also be worth returning to this conversation again once we get to a more final version of this draft. In the interest of time, Jennifer, I'm sorry, you have 4 minutes, but NV21, it's all yours.
Yeah, I'm starting to get used to speaking to X anyways. So quickly, NV21, codename watermelon. The whole idea is supposed to be very juicy. We thought about summer as well. However, Alex has pointed out in the other side of the world, it's actually winter, but we are staying as a juicy upgrade. So quickly goes to the key critical date really quick. So our code freeze date is going to be September 28th. Calibration upgrade is going to be October the 10th. And the mainnet upgrade is going to be November the 7th. We do want to stress this is a very hard deadline. Like we are very married, committed to these dates. We cannot even be like a week later because there's a lot of events, conferences, traveling, and Thanksgiving lining up. So quickly moving on to the next slide, I will go through the scope. So I think it's earlier last week, the implementers had a great call talking about like how much capacity that we have, review the FIPS that's proposed to be in scope, and we ended up the scope of to be including all the post NV19 FIPS that get postponed because of the quote-unquote emergency upgrade. So we're introducing FIP 52, which is increasing the sector and deal life, like max lifetime to 3 years. And we're also fixing the snap deals sector activation epoch bug. The synthetic ProRep is already accepted, so we're delivering that. We are also working on direct data onboarding, meaning storage provider, meaning data client and storage provider does not have to be using the built-in storage market to onboarding data into the sectors. There's a lot of like other good benefits from this FIP. The draft is open. Please go take a look. We are also considering in supporting allowing storage provider to move in the petitions so that they can reduce the human operations or like managing their provable storage. We are also introducing some FVM fundamental changes. The only thing I want to call out here is FVM team has decided to heavily descope a lot of the tracks that was discussed last week. So right now we're focused on fixing some security concerns and in getting down the foundation to be ready to support like awesome actors, which will be more to come in NV22, hopefully. So take a look on the latest scope on that link. We're also hoping to in fixing the long-term market cron, introducing the long-term market cron fix. So we put a kind of like a short-term stopgap in NV19, and it's doing pretty well. Network validation time is going really well. However, we do want to make sure the network is scalable, and that's why we are hoping to introducing this this fix as well. We have decided to actually postpone switch DRAM to NV22 just because the spec and implementation testing is not going to be ready in time, and we are also postponing the SuperSnap proof suggested by the proof team. A couple notes from the implementers. We do have a hard deadline here, so FIPS that's being considered today, if the FIPS are not accepted by September the 27th, they will be descoped from NV21. FIPS that are not fully implemented and tested by September the 28th will also be descoped from NV21. Any FIPS that are not on the list today, we are still open about the ideas. It's just implementers doesn't have the capacity to actually supporting the implementation. However, if FIP authors can work with open source contributors to actually implementing the code and make sure they are tested and production ready, and FIP is accepted, we are open-minded. We will considering those for NV21 inclusion. Quickly, next slide. Again, stress about the timeline again. All the FIPS must be entering last call so that it has at least 2 weeks before its acceptance, and then the code freeze I already covered. So moving on to the next slide. So you have heard me talk about this like implementers. What the hell is that? So last week, a couple of us from the Venus team, Lotus, Forest, there's a typo, and also Actor and RefFVM implementers, we gathered together and started to discuss about a priority, our engineering capacity on how much we can support in this NV21. And we really enjoyed our call. It was very productive, efficient. We get decision made, scope aligned, which is amazing. And we realized, oh my God, we should have few implementers as a group. It's a subset of core devs. We don't want to have governance duties or whatever. We just want to implementing the changes that's good for the Filecoin network. So we are planning to start having like regular implementer calls so that we can discuss more from a technical level and aligning on the priority scope, and also like just keep up to date with all the FIPS and all the development going on in different implementations. So there's going to be a call scheduled. And also, we also have an open public channel, few implementers that we are handing out these days. So you're welcome to lurk there if you want. Also, if you are implementers, please join the channel. I think that's it. 2 minutes over time, but you know.
That's okay. You spoke really quickly and it's a lot of important info. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you to everyone else who spoke today. Alejandro, Ayush, Arthur, who joined us, the Wavy who joined us. Thank you everyone for your questions. As usual, we will share slides. We will share all of the links to engage in these conversations. Appreciate you being here, and we will talk to you next month unless you are in Singapore or Iceland. Bye.